wanted to start by commenting on today's first reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. And the book of Ecclesiastes is written, or it's attributed, the authorship is attributed to King Solomon. And it's asserted that he wrote this at the end of his life. Now, if you recall, King Solomon, God had granted him a favor that he could ask for anything, and he asked for wisdom. So he was extremely wise, but unfortunately, as he got older and as his kingdom flourished and he became extremely wealthy and popular, he also became corrupted. And part of the reason he became corrupted is because he had made alliances with so many countries and taken wives from all these countries. So he had a huge harem, a huge, many, many wives. And he started honoring the beliefs of his wives and started building altars to these false gods. So he became corrupted near the end, but then it seems that he really became wise at the very end, and he writes this book of Ecclesiastes. And notice how he says, "Vanity of vanities," says the teacher. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." And what is he referring to? And, notice at the end that he says, there's nothing new. So what has been before, it will be the same again and again. There's nothing new under the sun. But surely there are things that are new. For example, King Solomon built the temple. He was the first to construct this huge, magnificent temple to the honor of God. So that was new. We could say that a kingdom such as King Solomon's, that was new. In our own age, we could say, well, television is a fairly new invention, or cell phones, or, so many things are new. But what the book of Ecclesiastes is getting at is that our lives are pretty much the same as in previous generations. Sure, they might be new things in the world, but pretty much we have the same kind of dispositions, the same wants and desires. Human nature doesn't change. We are born, we grow old, we die. One generation after the next. Is it very different? Do we remember past generations? Certain individuals, certain maybe historical figures, people who stick out. Yeah, we might remember them, but, so many people have died. So many people have lived. It's the world population right now, it's 7 point something billion. Let's just say 8 billion. I like to round it up to 8 billion. And in 100 years' time, all of us will have died and been replaced. Now, granted, there may be a few people who live to be over 100, but let's just assume that most people will die before they're 100. So in other words, imagine that. In 100 years, this 8 billion people living today will have totally disappeared. They'll be buried, yes, but their memory will be gone. Sure, in certain people's hearts or minds they may be remembered, but the whole point is it's so insignificant. All these people living in the world. And notice how he talks about how the sea, the streams all run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. So we know why the sea never gets full or overflows is because the waters of the sea evaporate and there's rain and this forms the rivers or the ice caps and they melt and it forms the rivers and the rivers flow back into the ocean, into the seas, and then they evaporate. It's a continuous process, but the sea is never full. And he refers to this in relation to how he says the eye is not satisfied with seeing or the ear filled with hearing. So what he's really saying is the eye is never satisfied. It always loves to see things. It wants to see new things. The ear is never satisfied. It's never full. It's never satisfied. We love to hear the latest gossip. We love to hear this. We love to hear that. So the whole point he's saying is all these worldly things, they do not satisfy. The things of this world cannot satisfy. Only God can satisfy. And this is the whole message of the book of Ecclesiastes, that we need to live our lives the way that God calls us to, and we need to take time to reflect on the things of God, which is actually what King Solomon was doing. He's basically philosophizing here. He's saying, what is the meaning of life? One generation comes, another one goes, and we're pretty much the same, but are we ever really fulfilled? And the answer is no. And he himself, he had this wonderful kingdom, but he wasn't fulfilled. It wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed God. But he sought it in other things, and his many wives, or trying to please his wives by building temples for their gods and all these things. And so we need to examine our own lives. We do so many things that are totally vain. And by vain, we mean like pointless. It's useless. Some people, they watch a lot of TV every single day. Maybe they watch soap operas, I don't know. But is it really that important? They've estimated how many hours of TV people watch in an entire lifetime. And I can't remember how many years it adds up to, but it's a lot. It's incredible. Something like 30 years or more of just watching TV. How much does that really benefit us? Sure, I think it's good to have some recreation, maybe watch a good movie once in a while, but we spend so much time on so many things, and what is the real value of it? Vanity of vanities. So we need to ask the question, well, how do we live our lives, and what are we living our lives for? Is it just to fill our ears and to fill our eyes? Or do we want to fill our soul? Do we want to fill our soul with the good things that truly satisfy a human being, so much so that all those other desires are seen as useless? In other words, when we look at the lives of the saints, they spent many hours in prayer. They spent many hours meditating on Scripture. They spent a lot of time in looking for opportunities to be at the service of others. Whereas for us, we like to put our feet up and to relax and maybe read a good book, or at least I like to do that, but just kind of self-indulgence sometimes. And we're really missing the point. Now notice in today's gospel reading, King Herod, he's perplexed about this. He hears about Jesus and he's perplexed about Jesus. And it mentions that Herod tried to see Jesus. And this is actually good. So we know Herod is a sinner. He's corrupt. He liked to listen to John the Baptist. And in one account, it's kind of like he imprisons him actually to keep him safe from Herodias. But Herodias arranges to have him killed anyways. And so now he's curious about Jesus. And this is very good. It's very good. And we should be curious about Jesus also. And we might say, well, of course we are. And we know about Jesus, and that's why we're here, because we love Jesus and we want to worship him. We want to receive him in Holy Communion. And that's great. And that's good. But that curiosity should continue to motivate us. St. Paul, he talks about the mystery of Christ, the unfathomable riches of knowing Jesus Christ. In other words, it's a source that is infinite. It's a source that we cannot exhaust. In other words, we can always grow in our knowledge, in our love, in our understanding of Jesus Christ. But we must seek him in the way that Herod sought him. In other words, we must seek to have a greater union with him, a greater relationship with him. This is the most important thing. And this is more satisfying than any worldly good. But often we don't see it that way. We seek worldly goods, worldly pleasures, worldly comforts. But we need to seek Jesus Christ. Now, yes, there needs to be a healthy balance. We can't just be praying constantly. So we live in the world. We have to work. Some people work, and we have to socialize. We have to have time for rest and recreation. But our number one priority should be our spiritual life. And I think for those of us who come to daily Mass, I think that is the way it is for us. But But as I mentioned before, spiritual authors point out that the ideal is that we're always striving to improve. If we just kind of come to a plateau and we think, oh, I'm good where I am, what really happens is we're actually declining without realizing it. So there's always going to be some struggle, whether it's the realization of a fault that we have or maybe the need to grow in charity. There's always something that should motivate us in the spiritual life. And if we take the time to meditate on the Gospels, on the Scriptures, that will enhance our spiritual life and hopefully enable us to grow.